I had always known the old forest as a boundary, an uneven, whispering wall of pine and oak that began exactly where the last crooked fence of our village ended. The elders told stories about it, of course, but their voices always carried that trembling half-laugh people use when they want to appear brave. I used to think it was all superstition meant to keep children from wandering too far, but I wasn't a child anymore. And when the forest began to call my name at night, softly at first, then with an echo that vibrated through my bones, I realized that some boundaries aren't drawn by people. They're drawn by something deeper. I didn't tell anyone about the whispering. It felt too personal, like it knew me intimately, like it had been watching long before I ever noticed. I tried to ignore it, burying myself under blankets, pretending the rustling outside my window was only the wind. But one night, the calling wasn't a whisper. It was a breath, slow, steady, right beside my ear. And when I opened my eyes, the window was wide open inward, as if something had slipped inside moments before. I decided to enter the forest at dawn, not because I was brave, but because I knew the calling would eventually pull me in, whether I wanted it or not. The morning light was thin, barely piercing the canopy. The air felt wrong, too still, too cold for late autumn. Every step I took sounded muffled, swallowed quickly by the moss. Birds didn't sing, insects didn't buzz. It was as if the forest held its breath, waiting. I walked deeper until the trees grew impossibly tall, their trunks twisting like they had once been molten and frozen mid-motion. The whispering returned, but now it came from all directions. It wasn't words yet, only a sound like pages being turned rapidly in a dark library. Then I found the first marker, an old wooden sign nailed to a tree, though the tree had grown around it, swallowing half of the wood. There were letters etched into it, but they changed each time I blinked. For a moment, the sign showed my name. I should have run. Instead, I kept going. The path narrowed until it felt like the forest was pushing me forward, herding me toward something unseen. The air thickened, and I felt a pressure behind my eyes, like a headache forming but not quite beginning. A shadow crossed my peripheral vision, but when I turned, there was nothing but trees, endless, identical, watching. Then came the feeling of being followed, not footsteps, not breathing. Something more primal, the sense of presence, ancient and immense, brushing against my awareness like a cold fingertip. I didn't look back. Some instinct told me that whatever walked behind me became real only when acknowledged. I reached a clearing. The sunlight couldn't touch it. In the center stood a stump, older than any living tree around it, its surface carved with patterns spiraling inward like a labyrinth. Something inside the grooves faintly glowed, pulsing like a heartbeat. And then I heard it, an actual voice this time, a whisper threading through the air. You returned. My skin crawled. I didn't remember coming here before. I didn't remember any connection to this place. But the voice spoke with certainty, as though it had been expecting me for years. I tried to speak, but my throat felt tight. The ground trembled gently, like something massive slept beneath the soil. The trees around the clearing leaned inward, creaking with anticipation. The stump's faint glow brightened. You left once, the voice murmured from everywhere and nowhere. But no one leaves the old forest twice. And then the clearing darkened, the heartbeat-like glow slowed, and the presence behind me stepped closer, so close I felt the cold radiating from it like a winter storm. Something brushed my shoulder. Not quite solid, but horribly real. I finally turned, and I wish I never had, because what stood there had no face, only shifting bark, leaves, and darkness woven into a vaguely human shape. Yet I knew, with a certainty that hollowed my insides, that it could see me perfectly. Its hand, if it was a hand, lifted and pointed toward the glowing stump, and the ground beneath my feet shuddered as if awakening. The faceless figure did not move again, but the forest around us did. The trees groaned like old ships in violent seas, their branches bending toward the clearing in slow, deliberate motions. The air thickened into something that tasted metallic, like breathing in rust. I tried to step back, but my foot wouldn't move. The soil had softened around my boot, gripping it like a hand. The glowing stump pulsed brighter, illuminating the swirling carvings. I realized then that they weren't carvings at all. They were roots, thin, hair-like tendrils slowly crawling across the surface, weaving new patterns, reaching toward me. Each pulse of light synced with the pounding inside my skull, a rhythm that did not belong to my heartbeat. I felt the presence behind me tilt its head, though it had no features to express intention. The message was clear anyway: step forward. I resisted. My muscles screamed in protest, not from pain, but from something worse. Like vines were coiling around my tendons, urging them to obey. I forced my eyes away from the stump and onto the trees. Their bark writhed subtly, as though insects moved beneath the surface. Shadows clung unnaturally to their bases, stretching upward like reaching arms. Then I heard voices. Not one, hundreds. They rose like a distant choir, layered and discordant, speaking languages I couldn't understand and yet somehow recognized in the pit of my stomach. The sound wrapped around me, pulling tighter with every syllable. The faceless guardian, or whatever it was, shifted closer. Its hand lowered, and with that simple motion, the soil around my boots loosened. I stumbled backward, gasping, but the forest didn't let me retreat far. Branches tangled overhead, blocking the faint slivers of sky. A question formed in my mind, uninvited. What do you want from me? The answer came instantly, not from the creature, but from the forest itself. To remember. I backed away until my shoulders hit a tree, one whose bark felt uncomfortably warm, pulsing faintly like skin. My breath shook. The clearing hadn't existed in any map or memory. How could I remember something I had never seen? The voices grew softer then, harmonizing into a single whisper. You were here before the forgetting. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't want to. The faceless figure took one slow step toward me. With each movement, leaves spiraled upward from the ground, hovering in the air like suspended ash. Its limbs creaked as if made of old wood forced into the shape of a person. I had the sudden, awful realization that this thing wasn't the danger. It was the guard. But guarding what? The stump's glow intensified until it cast long, warping shadows across the clearing. In its light, I finally saw what lay beneath the soil, shapes moving under the ground, like bodies drifting beneath ice. I could hear them too, faint, muffled thuds, scratches, echoes of nails against wood and earth. The faceless guardian lifted its head toward the treetops. The forest stilled, silent, listening. Then, without warning, The air split with a crack like lightning. A tear formed in the space above the stump, a thin vertical line of darkness so dense it seemed to swallow the dim light around it. Something inside the tear shifted, something enormous. The guardian lunged forward, placing itself between me and the stump. Its form expanded, bark splitting, branches erupting from its back like jagged wings. The ground shook violently, and the whispers turned into a panicked roar. Whatever was inside the stump wasn't supposed to wake. The guardian turned its faceless head toward me, though it had no eyes. I understood its command clearly, run, but the forest had no intention of letting me leave. When I tried to run, the forest changed around me in an instant, as if the trees themselves rearranged into new positions, sealing pathways and opening others that led deeper, not out. The ground turned uneven, rising and dipping like something beneath the soil was shifting restlessly. Roots slithered across my path, forcing me to leap over them before they could coil around my legs. Behind me, the guardian roared, a sound like boulders grinding together, like whole mountains waking from centuries of sleep. I didn't dare look back. The tear in the air had widened. I could feel its pull like a cold wind sucking the warmth from everything it touched. Branches clawed at my clothes and skin as I ran. The forest's whispers grew frantic, tripping over each other like terrified children. You must go. Too late. It wakes. Remember, remember, remember. Their panic fueled mine. My lungs burned, but I pushed forward, stumbling through the twisting underbrush. I didn't know where I was going. The forest guided my steps now, whether to safety or doom, I couldn't tell. Then the world fell silent. Not gradually, completely. The whispers cut off. The wind died. Even the thudding behind me ceased. I stopped running, chest heaving, ears straining to catch a single sound. Nothing. The stillness felt wrong, heavy, expectant. A moment later, a low hum rippled through the forest, so deep it vibrated in my teeth. It wasn't coming from behind me. It was coming from everywhere at once, through the ground, through the trees, through my bones. The hum grew louder until I could barely hear my own thoughts. And then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Something tall and impossibly thin stepped between the trees, its limbs too long, its joints bending in ways no living things should. Its form flickered like I was seeing it through heat waves, shifting in and out of existence. Where it passed, bark blackened and leaves curled instantly. It wasn't the guardian. This was what the guardian was meant to contain. My breath caught in my throat. The creature turned its head toward me, or rather, the space where a head should be, and the air thickened with pressure. It felt like the forest itself was shrinking away from it. The thing took a step forward, then another. Its feet didn't touch the ground. Its elongated limbs moved without sound. My body refused to move. Terror pinned me in place as surely as any physical force. The creature's presence pressed into my skull, filling my mind with images, endless forests twisted into spirals, roots growing through bone, faces forgotten in the dark. The world reshaped into something unrecognizable. Then I realized the images weren't visions. They were memories. My memories. But of another life. A life in which I had walked these woods not as an intruder, but as one of its keepers. A life in which I had helped bind this thing beneath the stump. A life I had chosen to forget. My knees buckled. I grasped a tree for support, but the bark writhed under my hand, reacting to the creature's proximity. The tree groaned as if in pain. The creature reached out one long, quivering arm. The air around its limb warped, bending the light. And then, the guardian slammed into it with the force of a collapsing hillside. The impact shook the entire forest. Trees cracked. The ground split in shallow fractures. The guardian's form splintered, pieces of bark and branches flying in every direction. But it didn't fall. It planted itself between me and the creature, arms outstretched, body broadening unnaturally like a shield. The creature let out a sound that wasn't a hiss nor a growl, but something deeper, something like the sound of a cave exhaling after being sealed for centuries. The guardian pushed it back, step by trembling step. But the tear in the air behind them widened again, as though responding to the struggle. I knew the guardian couldn't hold forever. And I knew, though I didn't want to admit it, that the forest wasn't calling me here to run. It brought me back to finish what I abandoned long ago. The ground vibrated beneath me as the guardian and the creature struggled. Every impact sent waves of pressure through the forest, bending trees, rattling the air, making my vision blur. The tear above the stump pulsed with each collision, widening like a wound that refused to close. My mind raced. The memories the creature had forced into me, broken shards of a life I had abandoned, burned like fire behind my eyes. I had been here before. I had stood in this forest, in this clearing, facing this same darkness. I had helped seal it away. But I hadn't done it alone. There were others then, faces I could barely recall, silhouettes surrounded by a soft glow. Voices chanting in a language that felt familiar on my tongue, but foreign in my mind. We had created a boundary, a prison woven from the living roots of the forest and the strength of our own spirits. But something had gone wrong. Someone had betrayed the ritual. Someone had fled, and the boundary had weakened ever since. My breath trembled as the truth clawed its way forward. It was me. I had run. I had abandoned them. And in doing so, I had condemned the forest to centuries of slow decay. The guardian roared again, but this time it wasn't a roar of defiance. It was a call, a desperate, pleading call directed at me. The forest trembled with the sound, the trees bowing as though begging. I staggered toward the clearing, each step sinking deeper into the memories swirling through my mind. I could almost hear the chanting again, echoing faintly through the woods, like ghosts reciting an eternal prayer. The guardian shoved the creature back a few feet, but the monster responded by twisting its limbs into sharp, jagged shapes. It struck the guardian with a blow that split its wooden form nearly in half. The guardian fell to one knee. A sound like cracking timber reverberated through the forest. Without thinking, I cried out. A raw, broken sound I didn't recognize as my own. The creature turned toward me, its head tilting in a jerky motion. It sensed the awakening inside me, the stirring of the old connection. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The stump glowed once more, but differently now, not a pulse of awakening, but an invitation. The spiraling roots within it shifted to form a shape, a pattern I remembered tracing with my own hands lifetimes ago. I placed my palms on the stump. The surface was cold and hot at once, alive beneath my touch. The roots responded immediately, curling around my fingers, weaving between them, spreading up my wrists like living bracelets. Words bubbled up in my throat, ancient and heavy. I whispered them. The forest whispered them with me. The air thickened with power, pulling at the creature like gravity made of light. It screeched, limbs flailing, trying to retreat, but the guardian seized it, holding it in place despite the fragments of bark peeling away from its body. The tear in the air flickered, unstable. The ritual demanded more. The roots coiled up my arms, reaching my shoulders, merging with my skin. My vision blurred with bright patterns that weren't light but memories, the faces of the others who had given everything to bind the darkness. Voices rose around me, layered, chanting through me, using me, guiding me. The tears shuddered, the creature convulsed, and I felt the forest's demand. Finish it. This time don't run. The power coursing through me burned like liquid fire. The roots tightened around my body, merging with my veins, threading into my chest. I could feel the forest's pulse sinking with my heartbeat until I could no longer tell which belonged to me and which belonged to the land. The creature shrieked, a sound that fractured the air like shattered glass. The guardian clung to it with the last of its strength, its wooden form crumbling piece by piece, but still refusing to fall until the ritual was complete. I raised my hands, now barely distinguishable from the woven roots encasing them. The stump beneath me vibrated, glowing so intensely the clearing turned white. The forest roared. Every tree, every root, every whisper, all of them joined the ritual, their voices merging with mine into a single thunderous chant that reverberated across the old world. The creature writhed violently, its limbs twisting into unnatural shapes as the ritual pulled it toward the tear, no longer an opening, but a closing wound. The edges of the tear folded inward, sealing around the creature like a mouth swallowing its last breath. The guardian looked back at me, its faceless head somehow soft, relieved, and then it let go. The creature was sucked into the collapsing tear, its form dissolving into swirling darkness. The tear tightened, shrinking rapidly until all that remained was a thin sliver. I spoke the final word. The tear snapped shut. The clearing fell silent. The light faded. The roots around my body loosened, retreating gently, leaving faint patterns across my skin like old scars. My knees buckled, and I collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. The forest exhaled with me, a long, weary sigh that rustled through every leaf and blade of grass. The guardian knelt before me, its form collapsing slowly like a tree dying in fast motion. But there was no fear in the way it fell, only peace. Its body crumbled into bark, then into soil, then into nothing at all. The forest whispered, "The guardian rests, another must rise." I understood. The ritual hadn't only sealed the creature, it had chosen a new protector. My bones ached. My skin tingled. The patterns along my arms shimmered faintly, sinking deeper into me with each breath. The forest no longer felt hostile or alien. It felt like an extension of my own body, ancient, powerful, watchful. Footsteps echoed faintly behind me. I turned. Shapes emerged from between the trees, not monstrous, not threatening, but familiar. Figures made of roots and leaves, faces carved from bark, yet somehow warm and expressive. The old keepers, my companions from the forgotten past, bound to the forest just as I now was. They bowed their heads, and I knew I belonged to the forest again, I had always belonged here, and now I would stand watch for as many centuries as the forest needed. The old boundaries had been restored, and I was the one who guarded them. The whispering around me faded into soft, steady breathing, like the forest finally falling asleep after a long, painful night. But before its voice drifted away entirely, it murmured one last message. They will come again. They always do. And I lifted my gaze toward the darkened tree line, already listening, waiting. And now I want to hear your opinion. Whom would you suspect first in this story? The one who runs from the forest, or the one who returns to it?